Okay, today is August 8th, 2017. I'm Ramon with Bold Like a Leopard, and we're doing a Q&A today on a topic that is strangely present in almost every debate, even debates that have nothing to do with it, which is the state of Israel, Zionism, Jews, conspiracies. Just kidding. So with me, there's personally always been an issue with this growing up in a country where people are used to being hyphenated Americans, Mexican Americans, Italian Americans, and then there's the factor of being a Jewish American, when there's always a question in my mind of whether a Jew is a religion, a nationality, an ethnicity. There's a lot of different ways that you could classify that descriptor. So it's always been like an ambivalent topic. I had one secular parent, one religious parent, and I did end up serving in the army because both of my parents were originally from Israel. But in fact, in the family, there's a tradition. I've had uncles that served in the army. My dad and my mom served in the army. And yet, the question of Zionism pops up a lot because, as you can see, I have a guest here, and she's active in Zionism. Now, I've come to the conclusion that I don't even know what Zionism means because a lot of people define it in different ways. And in fact, you can be somebody with absolutely no relationship to the topic and be accused of being a Zionist for no apparent reason. So let me introduce the guest today. This is Akllile Kebede. She is from Haifa in Israel, the city by the bay that's not San Francisco. I actually lived there for about 3 years, back about a decade ago. And Akllile, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be an Israeli and how you came to be a Zionist.
Okay, first of all, hi everybody. So, as Ramon said, my name is Akllile Kebede. I was actually born in Ethiopia, which is on the east side of Africa. Moved when I was very young to Israel, grew up there, and then about a year ago, I moved to the States working for a Zionist youth movement called Beitar. What Beitar does is bring together young adults, children, youth who have Jewish backgrounds and does activities for them that are related to Zionism, Israeli culture, Jewish culture. It's not a religious movement, but it is for Jewish movements, for Jewish people, excuse me. I came to be, as I define myself, professionally Zionist because I believe in Zionism, and I believe that all people need their own space and place where they find people like themselves, and they grow from that and become stronger, and that becomes part of who they are and what they are. So that's a very short introduction of myself and a little bit about the topic and how I came to be a professional Zionist.
So, like I said, there's an identity crisis among a lot of American Jews, and it's being talked about a lot in the, in fact, among people that have no sympathy for the Zionist cause, that they don't believe that there can be an identity that you can match between being Jewish and being something else, and it's become kind of a conflict lately. And I think in Israel, I was surprised to see the same thing. Do you see that there's an issue over there where there are people that are trying to undermine the cohesiveness of the Jewish people over there? Is there like a lot of division there, or is it, as it is portrayed in other media, kind of a monolithic society?
It absolutely, definitely is not a monolithic society, especially because being Jewish, you have it's actually two identities. One is a nationality, and the second is religious. And each person can choose to be part. Nowadays, we see that more than in the past. Each person chooses whether they want to be part of the Jewish religion and not part of the Jewish nationality, or part of the Jewish nationality but not being religiously Jewish, meaning you're culturally Jewish, you celebrate the Jewish holidays in a cultural way, but you don't necessarily believe in God or the religious aspects of that. And that comes, and you see that in Israel and abroad. In Israel, the Jewish identity is pretty much within the Israeli identity, and they kind of merge together. And the concept of nationality is that you belong to Israel and your nationality is Israeli. And we don't differentiate it much of being part of the Jewish nationality. While in America, you do see more of that togetherness. You see that people, at least from my personal experience, they do feel part of the Jewish nationality, while Israelis feel they're first and foremost Israelis, and then they're Jewish. We have this, if we look abroad and we look at other Jews abroad, it's whether we're part of the Jewish people and religion, but we're also part of the local identity, which can be American. And then comes the conflict of what comes first. And a lot of times we don't need to make that choice because it does not, there is no conflict, especially in America. But if you're an Arab Jew, meaning you live in Iran or you live in Iraq or Morocco, that might create a conflict of identity. And then both the local society and the Jewish people themselves see themselves first and foremost part of the Jewish people, and religiously also.
Yeah, that's kind of a theme that I've heard from people, especially from the Soviet Union, that they tell me, you know, that nowadays they're called Russians, but back in Russia, they were just, you know, straight up called Jew, you know, and that was their name. They would just be called Jew. And it was, the idea of what nationality means and what religion means, I think, complicates the topic. Like I said, for many years, in fact, I was familiar with your organization when I was a kid. My brother was pretty active in it. And yet, when I moved to Israel, I started to get a sense that the definition of Zionism is so vague that I don't even know how to identify what it means. And I don't go around calling myself a Zionist. I just believe that my tie to the country is through my family and my religion. But you, being as it is your place of business and what you do day to day, can you define what Zionism is, and exactly what it means as a philosophy?
So the origin of Zionism started way back in the idea, and we have to look at the word Zionism first. The word Zionism is built from the word Zion. Zion is referred to Jerusalem. It is one of the names that are given to Jerusalem by Jewish people and others. And what it portrays is the will and the need of the Jewish people for a home that is Zion, and that's the base of that. Zion in the meaning of Jerusalem, Zion in the meaning of Israel, and what used to be in the past the Jewish kingdom and the Israeli kingdom. Now, Zionism throughout the years changed. Before the establishment of Israel in 1948, it was being Zionist meant that you wanted to fight and establish a Jewish state. But once Israel was established as a Jewish and democratic state, you suddenly had a crisis where people said, we don't need Zionism anymore. And then there came a new wave that explained that we still need Zionism because not all Jewish people are in Zion, and they still have problems getting to Zion, to Israel. Let's say the example you gave, like the Russians, because of the Soviet and the communist regime would not let them go out of those, of Russia, the USSR, they couldn't get to Israel. So Zionism still existed in those areas. As the USSR and other communist regimes started falling apart in the 90s, here comes again the question, did Zionism die or did not die? Nowadays, people define Zionism or themselves as Zionist if they believe in the idea of a Jewish state, because we can still see nowadays, after 70 years, that there are still people who believe that Jews are not entitled for a country and Israel should not exist as a country. So being a Zionist means nowadays for a lot of people that you still believe in that idea. It does not mean you support the government, but you believe in that idea. And we can open a whole lot of definitions of what Zionism is and how it came to be. But we have different types of Zionism. There is religious Zionism, that their belief in that Jewish people deserve a Jewish state comes from religious Jewish reasons. Others are political, meaning more secular explanation, saying all people deserve self-definition and therefore Jews as well. You have other forms of people coming from their own personal experience and beliefs to bring Zionism into action. So some people get involved politically, others get involved religiously, others just culturally, and some, like yourself and myself, decide to take the extra action and serve in the military and take it to the next level, where you actually go not only believe in those beliefs, but you take the action to move there and to protect what you believe in by risking your own life, by putting yourself in risk, which in my personal belief is the outmost, sacrifice that a person can do for his own beliefs and specifically for Zionism.
Okay, and we've gotten a few more guests in the chat and you guys can add more questions at the beginning. Some people missed our introduction. So Akllile, I'm not going to make you introduce yourself again. She is a local youth organizer here in the United States for the Zionist youth organization, Beitar, which has been active here. It was active when I was a kid. I think it's been active here in Ohio since the 1970s. I think they're also active in New York State. I want to welcome Angel. He tunes into every one of my live streams, so thanks for tuning in again. But today we are kind of clearing up a lot of questions that people ask. There's a lot of people that accuse, people that they disagree with, especially if you're looking at the new media, of being a Zionist. Akllile, what does it feel like to have people, and I know you've been to some campuses, maybe you've had some experiences, what does it feel like to have people accuse your ideology of having connections to all sorts of things like the Illuminati? Do you get reactions like that, or is that something that people don't feel comfortable asking you?
People have a certain idea of what Israel is and what image, a certain image of Israel. When a lot of people imagine Israel, they don't see per se me or my face or a person like me. So it's a lot of times, a lot of accusations that they have against Israel. It's hard for them to come, especially here in American campuses that I visited. Come and ask them or say them like they would to my other fellow Israelis. And here I put the idea of also the fact of race, meaning they would not act the same way they act towards me, like they act to my white Israeli friends or my Arab Israeli friends. And they have these conflicts. When people imagine a lot of times Israel and it definitely comes and is connected to the topic of the Palestinians and Palestinian rights, they think they know everything and they have exactly the image of what's going on there. So I have had some reactions and some people saying things that are not educated and are not and are basically racist or anti-Semite. I'll say definitely anti-Semite, but being who I am and what I believe in, I stand in front of them and explain the things that I think they should look at differently. If people have the right to define themselves and have the right to have a place to be who they are and what they are and to govern themselves, same rights are relevant to any group in the world, and therefore also for me. So what's wrong with that? That is in the name of Zionism that they don't like, or it is the idea that people want to define themselves and have political rights that they don't agree, and so on and so on. And definitely the Israeli-Arab conflict, and more specifically the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, brings a lot of questions and also affects what I do and work for. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, and you do this as like a, you know, your day to day. I've had some remarkable reactions just from people finding out, not even that I'm Israeli, but that I'm Jewish. I'm getting some questions about North Korea, but I can't answer them on this thread because they're kind of a distraction. But Steve, I'll react to that. It's a hard topic to react to. I remember one of the funniest experiences I had. I was a junior in college, and I happened to have a friend who's Ukrainian. I'm still friends with him, and he had a friend who was Palestinian. And he told his Palestinian friend that I was in the Israeli army. And then that Palestinian friend insisted on having sit down with coffee to explain to me why I was basically an instrument of the occupier. How hard is it? I mean, you say you're talking to these people. Are they receptive to the answers that you're giving, or do they have like this natural distrust of just your side of the topic, just because the term Zionism is a really loaded word?
I've never felt that I have changed the set of mind or the beliefs of a certain person while talking to them. But I do feel and that it affects a little bit of how they think about it. Just the fact that they're there and listening, and not a lot of them listen, by the way. I have to say that a lot of them are there just to say what they have to say and literally just turn around and walk away. But some of them stick around, listen to what I have to say. And in the end of the day, I believe that the fact that we met, I listened to them and they listened to me, and we had a productive conversation, helps both of us reach to an understanding that is better. So we're in a situation of conflict, and if we want to get to a resolution, we do need to listen to each other and keep talking and keep listening. People who just state what they have to say, turn around and walk away, there is no conversation, and there lays the problem. And that coming from someone that says that they're pro-Palestinian and they want peace, but on the other hand, do not want to have a conversation, and all they want to do is state what they have to state, stick in what they believe in, and not even be open to the idea of conversation, just shows you where the problem lays.
Yeah, and I think one of the other issues that you're dealing with, you appear at, I mean, you go to college campuses, you have events there. You also go to high schools. Do you think that the youth today coming up through high schools and colleges, are they going to be, a willing conversationalist in this topic, or do you think that there's really imbalance of what information that they're getting, that they're kind of getting a feed of content that skews them against your side? Because I mean, I've seen people, not just on this topic, by the way, other topics where you wonder if people are really thinking for themselves.
Here lays the bigger problem, and I think we saw it even, in a bigger scale in the recent elections around the world and more here in America. We have the school systems, the colleges, teach you values of being open-minded, being humanist, being accepting the other. But when the other does not agree with what they believe in, they have a tendency to absolutely discard that side. And there lays the problem, where we teach certain values, but we don't follow them through. And I feel like that is the basic problem that we're having now. And therefore it's more specifically affects what I do and my reach to generally youth and young adults. Now, I don't say everybody's like that, because the fact is organizations do invite me, professors do invite me to come and speak in their classroom to hear a different voice. And usually my way and the way that I explain it is through my personal experience, which makes it easier for other people to listen and to accept, because you cannot discard anybody's personal experience. But when it comes to political issues, we see where the problem lays, where those values that they've been taught or they've been explained, there was another, is another factor that is being taught. There is a factor that is being taught to be tolerant to other people. But at the same place, when you believe somebody is wrong, they're taught not to be tolerant and not even to listen to the other person or to the other side. And that's where I feel like the concept of Zionism in Israel is a disadvantage because of the image that it has been portrayed. Now, I haven't seen one person who has visited in Israel itself, and has not opened his eyes and saw how things are not one-sided, and has not gotten the depth of the problem that we have. Problems are not just statements they're given by certain sides. In my opinion, they are much more complicated than what they seem to be always. So again, listening is the key, and discarding and teaching people to be not tolerate, to not listen to other people just because I'm trying to be tolerant to other people means that you're not tolerant at all. And yeah.
So I'm going to read a few comments and questions from the chat. Steve Markle, who's been asking a lot of questions, I'll put his most relevant one. He says we look like Storm and Cyclops from X-Men, which I think I've always thought of myself more as Gambit, but we have here Freedom Work. He said, since there are 3 different ways to be a quote-unquote Jew, I'm now curious as to which the anti-Jew white nationalists have an issue with and what those actual issues are. So I'll answer that, and you can reply to Akllile. White nationalists, if you haven't noticed, I had 2 of them on, and in some cases, their relationship to the Jewish issue, in some cases, is to gain attention. In fact, one of them actually said that to me up front, that's a way for them to gain an audience. In other cases, it goes back to a question that Dean asked me last week, why people the Jewish blocks in many countries, the Jews were in a middleman position. Tell me in the chat if you can still hear me. I think we are having a little interference. Can you hear me, Akllile?
No, I don't hear you clearly. It's cutting off.
I think we're back.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so um, I'm going to continue on the topic. There's an issue where, like I said, the word Zionist is now a loaded term that goes in place of Jew. And there's probably going to be other words in the future to talk about the same thing, which is that people have sometimes this need to talk about a power that is moving world events, and that's where you get a lot of these libels. Now, before there was an Israel, what would often happen was there would be a Jewish community in a certain country. I think a good example was Syria, where the community is a large minority, but they're pretty wealthy, or they have a certain profession. And when there is some sort of hardship, it's easy for other people in power, or people that are trying to gain power, to point to the Jewish community and say, well, those people are kind of different. Let's pay a little more attention to them. That's my take on it. And I don't think there really is a distinction between what types of Jews there are, freedom work. I think that they pretty much will look at any one of them and find fault with them. Akllile, do you have a position on that? I know it's kind of a strangely worded question.
So the way that I see it, and this is what happened throughout history, white nationalists, you know, Black activists, if it was Christianity back in the day, the Jews were always looked as the different group. They were never the insiders. And the biggest mistake that ever happened, in my opinion, is not mistake, but the biggest proof that people around the world and countries don't see a lot of times the Jews as part of them, is the Holocaust. People, Jews back then, fought for the countries, fighting as part being, if you're a German Jew, you're first German and then Jewish. That's how a lot of them saw themselves. And in the end of the day, Hitler came to rule the country, and that proved to Jews around the world they need their own home. They need a place where they're not the other, they're not the stranger, and they're just equal to the majority of the population. And that's how Israel came to be. Nowadays, you also see that, unfortunately, which is anti-Semitism, where Jews, although they are American, they've been here for 3-4 generations, they see themselves first and foremost as Americans, but they're always regarded as the Jews. They're always regarded as the different. And here comes a question. If you ask me what type of a Jew there is one type of a Jew, and he's Jewish. Everything else is not relevant, as long I will not come and say to somebody they're not Jewish because they're not part of one type or another type. And I don't think other people should do that either. Now, for the question of the 3 types of Jews, that depends on how each person sees themselves and how they define themselves, and I will not get into that. I don't think it's necessary, really.
Yeah, I think the question that he asked, there's actually a number of, because again, if you're talking about ethnicity, there are different types of Jewish ethnicities. There's different types of Jewish denominations, and even within them. So you could pretty much, like she said, you could go very deep into the rabbit hole on that issue. So we're going to move on to another question before we switch topics. We have Dean said, I once saw a video of the propaganda that the Palestinian TV networks broadcast, cartoons showing Jews as pigs. Is that still a problem, and how are they handling it? Want to go take a swing of that?
So the educational system in the territories, the Palestinian authorities, is very anti-Semite, where that is the least of our problems, where they write that Jews are pigs. The problem comes when they write in the educational books, and you can go and see it everywhere. It's enough to just open a kid's book and see how they portray Jews as disposable, as people that you can kill and go to heaven, as people that don't have the right to even exist. So if we're coming, so compared to that, calling Jews pigs seems, you know, not a big deal, but that's where everything starts. And if you educate little kids to that, you can just only imagine what type of hatred they're going to grow up being and how that affects the general political and security wise in Israel and the Middle East overall. That is a big issue that needs to be addressed. And it's very important to say that those books in the educational system in the Palestinian territories and in Gaza is sponsored a lot of time by European countries and European or American organizations that are saying they're doing good and helping out. But if this are the books that you're supporting, so how are you promoting peace? That will be my one and first question.
So this is like a topic, you know, and we're going to get onto the topic of the recent Temple Mount disturbances, but I think I'm not sure what Aklile's experience in the army was. We haven't spoken about it, but we have an issue. By the way, Akllile, I can tell you to see the chat questions. You might have to go to the actual video.
Okay.
But so sorry I had to say that on the air, but I can still feed them to you from the window. But what I was going to say is that my experience, I was a checkpoint inspector for about 2.5 years. And I used to see the material that they would distribute, not just to their kids, but they would distribute during their political campaigns. They would distribute during their, their local, whatever commercial campaigns that they had. And eventually, a number of us were able to start reading Arabic. And I remember I had a friend who found a copy of Mein Kampf in Arabic in somebody's luggage. So there is, I believe, a connection, a straight connection from, conventional, I don't know if you can call it conventional anymore, but, the traditional European anti-Jewish beliefs and the modern anti-Jewish beliefs of the Muslim world, which I don't think that they started recently. I think that a lot of them, in fact, my family came from Babylon, Iraq, and there were things that were happening back then before they ever knew that there was a state of Israel. So I think that, to Dean's question, this is really a societal problem. I think that even if there was funding cut off by the international community, we would have to consider if people would change their attitude and exactly why that attitude is so strong over there. And I think it really depends if they meet people like Akllile. I don't know that they would really change their minds because they're so set in their ways by family traditions and the society at large that it's very difficult for them to really open their minds to a different side of the argument. And on that note, last month I believe you did go to go back to Israel for some was it for guiding tourists or being there's an organization there called Birthright, and they bring young Jews to Israel to get an idea of our heritage. I believe that you went there, and there were a number of events that happened there during the time, especially in Jerusalem. Could you describe what is the significance of the Temple Mount to the Jews and also to the Palestinians?
So yes, I was last month in Israel counseling a group of young adults who went to Israel. A lot of them for their very first time. There were a few events there, as you heard, I'm sure, Lamon. After not being in Israel for a whole year, and going back and seeing those events coming back again was not really surprising. At the area there, you could have seen that things started to bubble up and that the Palestinians were looking for a third intifada, starting with the people that stabbed the whole family, the events that happened in the Kotel and the temple there. Not the temple, the El Aqsa mosque, with the killing of two Arab Israeli Druze police officers that were there for security reasons, just to make sure, it's safe, because there are a lot of people and there's a lot of commotion in Jerusalem. In the end of the day, you have three religions that see that as the holiest place of their religion. And then again, the killing of the young family of the two kids, when a Palestinian terrorist went in and stabbed them during the night. We're not talking about some soldiers. We're not talking about adults. We're talking about little kids that were murdered during the night in their sleep. And those events just
Akllile, I don't know if they can still hear us. Hold on. Let me just make sure.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear you for a second. Okay, keep going.
I was just saying that there are certain people, which Abu Mazen being the first one, and the Hamas leaders being the other ones who are in Gaza, who benefit from creating those wars and those conflicts with Israel. Those people get a lot of political support from that. They get a lot of TV time and trying to support themselves and paint and portraying Israel as the aggressive side. But if we look at each action that has happened in the past month and a half, 2 months, we can see a constant rise in Palestinian terror against civilians and young children and people that are there to keep us safe. And I'm not talking about attacking a soldier in Palestinian territories. I'm talking about going in and stabbing little kids and throwing stones at passing cars with kids and killing people for no apparent reason other than hate and wanting to create propaganda. The moment that Israel will react and try to protect itself, everybody's going to forget about those past 2 months and all the terrorism that has happened against Israel. They're going to remember only the fact that Israel started the next round of conflicts in the Middle East, which is, you choose to believe in what you choose to believe. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it truth.
And I want to make a point here about, my own experience too, which I think it hasn't changed as far as I know, the way the region works. Watching the Palestinian people for 8 hours a day for 2.5 years was a real learning experience for me. And I started to notice, patterns in their culture. And one thing I noticed about their militant groups, which, I did a lot of reading about them before I went into the army, just because, I was always a bookworm. if you look at the names of the organizations, there's the Fatah group. The Fatah or the Al-Aqsa Brigade, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Their armed wing is the Abu Ali Mustafa Martyrs Brigade. The Hamas's military wing is the Izzeddin al-Qassam Martyrs Brigade. They hold martyrdom to be such a. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting some freezing here. But obsession with martyrdom in their culture that I tend to believe, based on the children that I would see, just day to day, that their main idols, just like we have in America, people grew up, they wanted to be like Allen Iverson or Ken Griffey or Alex Rodriguez. Their role models are these people that they go and they'll stab a person. They were and I used to find material where they'd show a man in his battle dress, and it would say, this is Shahid Mustafa Hanani, for example. I remember that was a huge family, the Hananis in my area, that they were a family of people, that cousins, brothers. They would go and they would get killed committing terrorist acts, and they would become almost like an all-star team for their village. And it was a very interesting experience. And I think that that's one of the reasons why they just have this attitude where there is no peaceful resolution in the near future, in my opinion, based on that type of culture. I'm going to scan the chat for some more questions, but in the meantime, there's like this issue with the Temple Mount. It seems to flare up usually in the summer. What's the significance of the Temple Mount? There was just a holiday, I spoke about it in the summer, Akllile, that it's not exactly a holiday, but I think you know what I mean.
Yes. First, let me add one little thing to what you just said. It's very important to know that if you go and make a terrorist attack, in most civilized countries, you get punishment. But in Palestine, in the Palestinian territories, if you have more kids who went and were suicide bombers and terrorists, and they died or are in prison, your family is getting more money. So if you ask yourself, what kind of a normal person would go and kill themselves? They're going and killing themselves because they're promised that their family will receive more money from the Palestinian authorities because they went and did the terrorist act. So if people come and say, no, the Palestinians want peace and they're doing everything in their possibility to make it happen, you can believe it as long as you're sponsoring terrorism and encouraging people to go and kill themselves. Now, about the holiday and the importance of the holiday and why it's happening in the summer. Winter is not a convenient time to start wars. That is a very strategic and known thing. And countries usually try not to start wars or conflicts during the winter. The summer is ideal, and during holidays, it's even more ideal for the reason that people are more related to their religious side. And Islam, and in the majority of population in the Palestinian territories are Muslims, encourage what we call shahidim, or what we call jihad, what they call jihad. Jihad is dying in the name of Islam. But obviously, looking at it from political point of view, this has nothing to do against Islam. Israel is not a country that is fighting against Islam or has hatred against Islam. Israel is a country which has a lot of Muslim people, almost 2 million Muslim people living in Israel peacefully. They have their own control over their own religious, decisions, marriage, and so on. And Israel as the state does not, ban Islam or just like any other democratic country. So if you personally ask me, I think it's a misuse of jihad, the religious concept, into our nowadays religious times. And Islam, the holidays can be sometimes in the summer, they can sometimes be in the winter. So it's not a very specific reason to why it happened now, but people are more religiously aware and are more connected to those aspects of jihad and terrorist acts against Israel, because that since they were young and we were talking about the education system, they're taught that Israel is the enemy, and whatever, if it's enough for you to say I'm Israeli, or even not Israeli, saying I'm Jewish, and that will flare and ignite their hatred towards you. So they don't need to know you personally. They just have a certain image of who you are and what you are. And that is a problem.
So one of the issues that comes up a lot with regards to the Temple Mount is the Muslim sensitivity to the issue. I know from my reading that the significance for the Muslims is that is alleged to be the site where Muhammad rose to heaven on his stallion. Thanks for the update, Angel. He sent me something about Tree of Logic's station. Tell her I hope she gets better. Anyway, Muhammad ascended to heaven on his stallion, according to their religion, but the actual name of the city never appears in the text of the Quran. But what people don't talk about when they're, especially if you're talking about a station like the BBC or even U.S. media like the New York Times, is that the Temple Mount is called the Temple Mount because in centuries before Christianity, there was a temple there. In fact, there would be no Christianity if Christ had not gone to the temple. I mean, that's where the whole thing the New Testament occurred in a context of there being a temple, a Jewish temple, where Christ lived. And what I was alluding to earlier is that these attacks, I see that they happen very often in July. I remember when there was the kidnapping of three Jewish students 3 years ago. It was in July during this holiday season. It's not a holiday season, but it's a mourning season would be the better term, called the Dire Straits. And I don't laugh because I know it's the name of a band, but it's his totally important book in the, I actually read it and it had a deep effect on, my understanding of religion. So it's very often ignored in the media. And do you think, Akllile, I know that you and I, we have different religious beliefs, different political beliefs probably too, but do you think that the Jewish religious connection to the land of Israel is completely ignored by the media like I do, or do you think that it's simply not really supposed to be a factor in the whole question?
I think that of it, ignore it. It is not. It doesn't bring weighting to support Israel or to explain the Israeli point of view. It just does not, and therefore it's just not reported. And at the end of the day, if we're talking about BBC or CNN or any Western media, they will go with what sells. They're no different from advertisement in Super Bowl or anything else. They're still franchises that are looking to make money, and they're making money because they're selling what sells, and what sells is not Israel or the Israeli point of view. You can see that by the coverage of events in the area, what they choose to cover, and also their terminology of things, what words they're choosing. It's very unfortunate, but it is true now. I believe that in the end of the day, a lot of the people that work there, a lot of journalists nowadays don't even believe in equal and fair journalism. The journalism that we see today is more opinions more than it is news. It's the opinions of whoever is covering them. And we've seen and heard of people creating their own news or just reporting whatever they have without checking if they're true or not, just because it fits what they believe in. We've seen a lot of coverage when about the 3 kids, by the way. They were not Israelis, they were Jews studying, doing a study abroad program in Israel. One of them, if I'm not mistaken, and they were kidnapped and killed. And that just explains, and when it was covered at the beginning, it was not explained the way that it was, although from the beginning they knew what was going on. And it's very unfortunate. And that is what people like me have to deal with when we meet other people, and we present the point of view of Israel. People come out and say, we did not know, we did not hear. Where can we find, sites and information that is true and honest? And it's hard to find. The truth is that it is not easy to find those sources that tell the truth nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, that it doesn't just factor into the Israel topic. I actually did something about Baltimore last week that related to that. Two Baltimore media groups that were going out of business that claimed that they were independent media, and I think that connects. Like, a lot of people believe that they are independent when, in fact, coverage of any given topic is really their own prejudices. In Israel, you see a bit of that. An issue where I see, and that's my opinion, I think probably respond. When you see this whole issue of sensitivity to Muslim traditions happening here in America, the same questions crop up in Israel, because the Israeli government has a lot of Muslim citizens. They also have citizens of a number of other minority religions, the Druze religion. They have Greek Orthodox and Catholic citizens of I believe they're mostly Arabs. However, when it comes to Jewish minority across the world and in Israel, I think the media does ignore it a lot. There was a story this week that there was a synagogue that wanted a building permit in Queensland, Australia, and they were denied the permit on the basis that it might attract, this is kind of a comedic statement, it's like dark comedy, it might attract a terrorist attack. So they were denied a permit on that basis. And I think it really is time to question if we're supposed to be sensitive to people's religion, then shouldn't it be to all people's religions, or does it only have to be to one? Now, I think in Israel, you have the confluence of 3 different religions, like over there, so they're already dealing with it. You lived in Haifa. Can you tell us what was like the climate there? That like how is it that people interact there of different faiths?
So Haifa is referred to as the coexistence city. We have Muslims, Christians, Druzes, Baha'is, Jews, and I'm sure there are a few more that coexist there. And holidays, as you've mentioned, are pretty sensitive. But in Haifa, for example, I can give you the example of during December, where Ramadan, Hanukkah, and Christmas, all 3 come to be at the same time, the same period of time between November and December. And the city of Haifa decided that instead of approaching this issue in a very, and looking at it as a dangerous or sensitive time, they decided to take it to give it another spin and created what's called the Holiday of Holidays, where the three main religions, the Jewish, Christianity, and Islam, are celebrated in all public spaces together. And you can see areas where you have the tree with all the lights, which symbolize the Christianity, and then you have Hanukkah with the Chanukiah, that symbolizes Judaism, and Islam, where the houses are lit up and the holiday is beautiful, and there is a happening going on in weekends and a bazaar, and it's kind of bringing the three religions and giving them space to express themselves in the public areas, and by that way kind of creating opportunity to talk and meet people that you might necessarily meet or talk to in your everyday life from the different religions. But the reality is not the same in other cities in Israel. Yom Kippur, which is one of the holiest fasts and holiday, it's not a holiday, it's a fast, but it is a day that has a high importance in Judaism. And being a country where the majority of people are Jewish, it is expected to, respect each other and not drive in the roads or go through Jewish neighborhoods, because we don't use any public transportation, don't listen to music, everybody walks. The country is pretty much on mute during that day. But you see people sometimes, because they don't share the same beliefs, kind of creating conflict and actually making a party in the middle of the day. Now imagine yourself, you're fasting and everybody around you is fasting, and there's this one car blasting music, driving through the streets. Now I'm not even talking about the safety issue, I'm not talking about anything, but it's about respecting each other and our religious differences. So you do have people that are insensitive, but there are a lot of times people that are sensitive, but those kind of stories don't come out to the media. If I may just go back a few steps back, they don't come out, they're not talked about outside the Israeli media or the Israeli conversation. And that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I want to tell a personal story about that. I remember my last year living there was Yom Kippur, and I have most of my mother's family area. This was in 2009.
Yes.
Akko is about, I'd say, 45 minutes drive north of Haifa, which is where Akllile is from. I don't have a map with me, but AKKO or ACRE, I think in English they call it. And my cousin's neighborhood it's called Shikun, which in Hebrew it kind of means, I think it's like projects. She told me that, and this was not reported very strongly in the media, on Yom Kippur, an Arab driver went to visit somebody there who he knew. I think it might have been his girlfriend, and he was blasting music like was described in Akklile's account. And I don't believe it's an isolated incident. People came out and kicked him out of the neighborhood. What happened next was a full-scale race riot. The people from the old city came over to the Jewish neighborhood, started smashing windows and destroying property and cars, attacking people. This is on the holiest day of the year in the Jewish calendar, which is it's kind of like the day where the Jews repent for all their sins throughout the year. So the holiday ends, and then a bunch of the people from the Jewish neighborhood went into the old city and returned the favor. And it was generally hushed up, not just around the world, but in Israel too. It was a incident that scarred a city, Akko, which is a pretty much much smaller than Haifa, was also known as a city known for good coexistence, a good tourism industry, and it's become, due to the conflict and due to, I would say, this identity politics over there. This coexistence is harder to do because people are pressured to, just engage in these types of provocations, and that was an incident that I think was it was very depressing because the Israeli media itself wanted to downplay it because it went against the idea that there are tensions due to people that just don't respect each other's communities. And in this case, it was a Jewish community that was disrespected. I want to shift the topic. First, there's a question from Denise, and then I have another topic, and we'll see how long we'll go after that. But she said, is it true the population is exploding in Israel because Jews are returning due to fear for their safety in countries like England because of the Islamic threat?
Can I see that question? Wait, let me a second. So the population in Israel is not exploding at all. So that part of the statement is not true. But the fact that there are a lot of Jews making Aliyah, which means immigrating to Israel because of safety issues like England, is true, but more specifically, I would like to bring up what's happening in Paris and in France, where there's a lot of anti-Semite activism that is happening there and creating a lot of safety issues, and a lot of Jews just don't feel comfortable living anymore in those countries. And we're not talking about some third world, politically ruled by capitalism countries, not capitalism, sorry, but some kind of, non-democratic countries. We're talking about democratic European, the modern world countries that talk about democracy and the values and how all people are invited and welcome. They actually cannot guarantee the safety of people, of synagogues, of people that have been their citizens for more than 500 years. It's just unimaginable. That is something that we have an issue with, and that just for a person like me proves how much it is a necessity to maintain a Jewish and democratic country in Israel. It's a proof that we as people around the world have not developed a system where people can feel equal and feel safe wherever they are. And listen, there's a joke that I always say, being a woman and being Black and being who I am and what I do as a profession, I've been screwed over throughout history all these years, and still we are not at the best time in history where I'm not screwed up yet. So we as people still need to work hard and go with it. But it is a threat for Israel and Jewish people, what's going on around the world. And Israel can still have more Jewish people coming back home.
Next question. We're going to get to the topic of BDS, but before that, we have Dean Kruger, always has a lot of questions and good questions, but he says, are the Israelis aware that President Obama tried to influence the Israeli election to try and get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu? If so, how bad did that hurt our relationship?
So here's the thing. Obama tried to influence the Israeli elections, and that's obvious in Israel. And the 8 years of Obama's regime and being the president of America might have been good for America or might have not been, each person their personal opinions. But for a lot of Israelis, for the majority of Israelis, the Obama administration was not good for Israel at any stage of it. And there will be some people who would come and claim that, would say that the Obama's administration invested more money into Israel than any other administration. And the truth is, whenever America invests money in any other country around the world, they're actually investing in America itself. The answer is very simple, because the end of the day, when that money goes to that country, America makes those countries buy the products and work with contractors that are American. So whenever America gives out money, that money comes back to support American economy. And here comes also the end of the day, why a lot of people in Israel were supportive in these elections in Trump's victory, and why they were happy, because after 8 years where Israel had almost no support from American administration in the international arena, and I'm talking about the UN, the resolutions that were passed, the fact that the Obama administration did not stand behind Israel when there were anti-Semitic actions going on, and did not do what Israelis expected that America will do for them, as Israel has done for America. And that hurt a lot the relationship between Israel and America. And it's not where it was during, Bill Clinton's time or even Bush's time, Bush Jr. We are now, both the American administration, the current American administration, and the Israeli administration, working really hard to bring back not only the benefit that both sides have from having a good relationship, but actually having a good, warm relationship between the two states.
So I think I'm going to give my own take on it, but I don't want to go too long because I won't be able to shut up. I've kind of been a critic of the way that the relationship is between Israel and the United States, because I think that we've come to a point where, like she alluded to, the issue of money has become more important than the issue of what's being accomplished. And I think that what does the United States need from a country in the Middle East? They sort of need a country that they can trade with and that will not threaten them. What does Israel need as a relationship with the United States? They need a country that they can trade with, and obviously they need to buy defense systems. But in fact, Israel does have its own defense industry, and they've had defense contacts and work with other countries as well in the past. I believe with France there was a long relationship, but yes, I believe that the Obama administration was an excellent, and the Bush administration for other reasons. They were all examples of the fact that we need to redefine the relationship, because in some cases these negotiations with the Palestinians are being leveraged using aid money. Now, is that the proper way to negotiate a peace treaty? I would say no. I'd say it's a problem for the Israelis. I'd say it's a problem. By the way, the Palestinians receive foreign aid too. I think that there's a lot of problems for the average Palestinian that are tied to what the aid is going to, and not just because of corruption, but because of a dependency that's been established. And it's really an issue that I've talked about before. So we don't need to go deeper into it. We could probably dedicate a different session for that. In fact, I've done a different session on it. But let's talk a little about a little organization or movement called Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. They have been active. I think I remember them cropping up in 2005. Could you give us a little description of what their goals are and maybe who they are?
So what you're talking about is what's called, in short, the BDS movement. The BDS movement is an organization that claims to be a pro-Palestinian and a Palestinian-led movement for freedom, and it claims to be inspired by anti-apartheid movement that was in South Africa. Now, what they're doing by this is claiming that Israel is an apartheid country. Now, apartheid has a very specific definition, as we might all know. And by portraying Israel as an apartheid country, they're claiming that the only way that we can actually fight against an apartheid country is by boycotting and divestment and sanctions against Israel. They're not talking about a violent action, but they are talking about taking an entire country and making it look like it's a a country where within its borders is racist and is treating people differently, and that it is treating Arabs in general, not only Palestinians, in an unfair, systematic, legislative way, which is absolutely untrue. The Palestinian territories are not part of Israel. The conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis is a political security conflict, which is not part of what's going on within Israel. Now, for a country to be called an apartheid country, it has to be, within its country, it has to have legislation that is against a certain minority or majority, for that matter, a different group that is not part of the elite that is ruling, which is not true. Israel is a democratic country, one of the most democratic country, and definitely the only working democratic country in the Middle East and most of that region. It's a country that, because of its legislation, because of its laws within the country, is part of a lot of democratic European unions and takes part in a lot of other organizations because they pass that, test of how democratic your country is. Now, what they're doing actually is not working, in my personal opinion, is not working for pro-Palestinian or supporting the Palestinian freedom and, justice and equality, as they say at their website. It's actually trying to go against whoever is supporting Israelis or is Jewish. They're a very anti-Semitic organization. If you go to a place and speak about Israel or speak about Jewishness and how you are connected in a very personal way, and it has nothing to do with talking about the Palestinian issue and the conflict, they will still come and blow up your event. And I can give you one personal example that is happening all around here in America in campuses. But from my personal experience, I went to a certain campus. They organized an event that an Israeli veteran came and talked about his personal experience, his story, how he came to be, why he decided to serve in the military, what happened there. And actually, the organization that invited him invited the pro-Palestinian organization and told them, listen, come and listen, say what you have to say. This is a great platform. Let's talk about things. What they did is, in a 2 days, 3 days window, they created a different event. They made sure that it will happen in the next door. And they were talking about and showing a movie about the life of Palestinians in Israel. Now, if they want to promote talking and create an opportunity for peace and doing good by the Palestinians, I would think they would want to create a conversation. Today, that's not what's happening. What they're looking to do is discard Israel as a country that has a right of existence. And in their eyes, Israel does not have a right of existence. And I would suggest to go and look and read their manifest, and you will see a lot of anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish actions there that has nothing to do with their campaign, that has nothing to do with their goals of, being a pro-Palestinian organization and fighting for the Palestinian. It's an organization that promotes hate to Israel and to Jewish people around the world.
I'm gonna kind of follow up on that. The issue with BDS that I'm seeing is that they are an organization that they've been. I'm getting a lot of questions here about SpongeBob SquarePants for some reason, but I'm gonna have to mute this guy. Sorry, Andy Kishore. This is very distracting. Anyway, so what they'll do often is that they will go to stores that feature Israeli products and label them with defamatory statements. So they're actually vandalizing private property oftentimes, these BDS activists. And I think that I've established on my channel that I believe in civil liberties. And one of the things that I'm having to grapple with is how do we balance the fact that the BDS people, yes, they have a message to give out. Unfortunately, it's a message that I think is very defamatory towards Jews specifically. Man, I gotta block this guy. He's just annoying as hell. Sorry, guy. It's very distracting. I'll unblock him tomorrow. But the issue is that, and here we're talking about freedom of speech. I just had to block a SpongeBob SquarePants guy, but there's an issue where these BDS activists, they're exercising their freedom of speech, but they don't want to grant other people freedom of speech, often just because they see Israel as a genocidal state, beyond even an apartheid state. And yet, I see very often that they will go to these campuses and pretty much behave as if people are required to give them attention. How do you see, and I'll bring up an incident that is in my mind, how do you see the balance between giving a forum to even Israel's critics and then protecting the voice of people like you? How do you, what's your advice to a university that's trying to go to solve that issue?
So in my past, I worked for a university in Israel, and we did have to deal with the idea where we line, where we say this is okay, but this is not okay. This kind of activity is accepted, but this kind of activity is not accepted. At the end of the day, in every university, you need to come and when you create an event, you ask for space to do that event, and you ask for approval. Now, as long as it goes, through the right, pipes, it should be no problem to bring it, to give the place and the space for them to do the activity. Now, when you do that, you can create for one saying, no, listen, we think it's going to be, it's going to create conflict, and therefore we're not going to approve your activity. If this is going to create conflict, you have to ask yourself, why is this creating a conflict? Is it because there are people who don't want to hear that? And if so, what is the reason? If it is just security, then you need to provide the security to give the platforms for people to speak. That's what, when we talk about the basic rights of people, and one of them is the freedom to speak and to talk and to bring ideas to the table, you have to make sure you create a safe space for all of those ideas and opinions to come. But the moment that those ideas and concepts create are words of hatred, and they need to be stopped. And in that sense, I'm talking about if there is a Palestinian movement where they're talking about that someone does not have the right to exist because they're Jewish, or we're talking about other, organizations because someone is Black or someone is, I don't know, Asian or whatever people nowadays hate and do not want to give them the right to exist, that's where it should stop. But as long as it is a conversation where people can learn and benefit from, and we're not calling to the destruction of any other side or person or a group of people, it should be acceptable, in my opinion, because the freedom of speech is that you have the right to say what you think. And that is relevant in campuses very much. Outside of a campus, a person can say whatever they want. We live in a time where we have endless, opportunities, if it is on YouTube or other internet-based media, to say what we think. But in campuses, there should be a red line, and that red line should be the call to extend or to discard the right of people, and in this case is the right of Israel to exist.
So I think there's like a little bit of difference between what I believe and what she does, but the issue right now in America, I think that freedom of speech is being lost here, but mostly it's on the side of people that are, they hold similar opinions to Akllile, or who brought it up? Was it Freedom Work, Ben Shapiro, who often gets blocked from campuses. He's a conservative commentator, and they're getting blocked. Jordan Peterson is a very famous YouTube guy who's being blocked all the time from speaking places. But very obviously, the same thing could happen hypothetically to the other side, the left-wing side or the pro-Palestinian side. And I think that one of the things to remember is that a lot of these groups that do get banned, like the Students for Justice in Palestine, they get banned oftentimes because they do violate other codes of the university by harassing people, by publishing all sorts of personal details of theirs. I've seen cases, and there are organizations. I think one of them is called FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, that documents these. Campus Reform is another, where these organizations, they want to talk about activism and defending, in their case, the Palestinian cause, but by doing so, I believe that they are alienating a lot of people. There was a man at UCLA, I think it was 2 years ago, an Indian American Hindu man who was basically harassed. He was a student council leader, and he was harassed to such an extent that he transferred to I think it was the University of Denver, but I'm not sure, because he wouldn't ratify a BDS resolution. He said that, in his opinion, it just violated the school's terms of service. So in some cases, I think absolutely freedom of speech. If you want to have an organization that believes, in distasteful ideas, distasteful to me even, yes, your speech is defended, but your other conduct is not defended. If you're harassing people, if you're discriminating against them, which was the case in his instance over at UCLA, then it's not even an issue of freedom of speech. You're actually violating other people's personal freedoms themselves. Akllile could probably speak of a few instances, she already has, about her tours of college campuses. What do you think about this performance boycott by artists of Israel? Do you think that it is getting stronger or weaker as the time's going
on? You're talking about Israeli artists that are banned to perform in certain places around the world?
Well, there's two angles to this, so maybe I'll rephrase the question. So we'll start with that. There are Israeli artists that are banned from performing around the world. And then there are artists that are claiming that they will not perform in Israel.
Okay, so if you are a performer and your job and business is entertainment of people, it's your choice to perform where you want. But I don't see your business in politics or getting or stating certain things and imposing them. So if you choose not to perform there, whatever your reason is, don't perform there. Whatever your reason is. And that takes us to a whole conversation of people and celebrities using their celebrity status to, play the political game and tell people what they should or should not do because I, as a celebrity, have a certain opinion, which does not make it any different from mine or yours or the other, John Doe. It's just an opinion. The other opinion that I have about forbidding Israeli performers around the world and even going and disturbing those performances, I think it has no place. We're talking about culture. We're talking about people who, are doing what they worked hard for. Imagine you at your place of work, somebody comes and disturbs you from doing your job just because you're Jewish or just because you're American or just because, I don't know, you're walking funny or just because it's you. And it is no different from school bullying or work bullying or any other bullying. The people who went to see that performance wants to see that performance. And listen, a lot of artists in the Israeli cultural arena are actually people who are politically Israeli left, which means they are pro-Palestinian rights, they are pro-Palestinian state, they are pro whatever. And imagine, and whatever they believe in and they're doing and they're going abroad and performing, but then they're being sanctioned just because they're Israelis, regardless of what their political opinion is just a sad, really sad story of that what people do. And that takes me to the point that you were talking about, you can have the space and place to say what you think, but everything that you do beyond that is harassment, and that is not legal and is not acceptable in any way.
Yeah, and I think like for me it's an important issue because I think living in Israel, there's one thing I have to be impressed with, even though it wasn't always a fun time there, but the people there have such a breadth of a variety in terms of tastes and opinions. There's people that we could talk about the Arsim, which are the Israeli version of Guidos, and then there's people that are a lot of hippies and reggae fans over there, and then there's religious music. They're a very vibrant religious music scene. If somebody wants to, I'll type in his name. Amir Benayoun was one of my favorite, and I don't like a lot of Israeli music, but this man is one of the greatest singers I've ever heard. So I find it very disturbing that people that otherwise are always talking about, discovering new artists, they want to screen artists because of their national origin, which is contrary to what I think that, this country, the United States, is about. There's a couple incidents that happened recently. I commented on one of them. Matis Yahu, I think last year, he's a Jewish reggae artist from, I think, the New York area. And he went to a festival in Spain, and some of the organizers interviewed him, and they asked him if he supported BDS. And when he said that he is not a political artist, they said, well, maybe you don't belong in this event. So it blew up in their face because there were a lot of people that were expecting to go to Matis Yahu's event. And I haven't been following him very much, but he has a massive following in Europe, and I think that this politicization of music is a huge powder keg. Like it can backfire very easily just in like an instance like that. The second incident, which happened while Akllile was in Israel, I think, was the decision by Tom York and Radiohead to appear in Israel. And for those of you that don't know, Radiohead they have a lot of leftist views on politics, but they have a standard which I have to admire, is that, you know, they go to a place and they believe in the performance and the influencing of people through their performance, which I think is really the mark of an artist. John Lydon had the similar stance when he was pressured not to appear in Israel, and then there was a public feud between Mr. York, who's an amazing singer and musician, and Roger Waters, who is the figurehead of the BDS artist movement. And it's sort of a testament to the fact that you have artists that are trying to screen other artists and force them to conform to their views. Do you think that movement is getting stronger, the BDS movement among artists, or do you think that things like what Tom York did are showing that it's kind of a lion with no teeth?
Personally, I don't think it's a lion with no teeth. I think it's a big issue that is rising as the years go by, and it's becoming stronger and stronger. And trying to push your own personal political views upon other people is wrong, whatever side you're on, the right, the wrong, the right, the left. It is not acceptable. And I actually appreciate people who within their profession believe in what they're doing, and whatever their political opinion is or whatever their views are, they know how to differentiate the two. There was a statement by certain political, not political, but artists that were speaking against Israel or speaking in a pro-Palestinian language. That does not mean they're part of the BDS movement. But at the end of the day, if you are part of the BDS movement and you believe in what you believe, you need to live by your own standards and beliefs, but you shouldn't try to impose them on other people. And I feel like the biggest problem that I have with the BDS movement is that they don't respect those boundaries. Although they say they believe in a nonviolent actions and promoting the Palestinian agenda in a nonviolent way, they're actually very violent by pushing people out of the whatever cultural entertainment industry, trying to push people, harassing them. Harassment is violent in my eyes, whether you raise your hand or not. The way that you speak can be very violent to people, and that's what they're doing. Pushing people outside of whatever group or activities that you're doing is a very violent action. And this is rising as the years go by, and you see that more and more nowadays. If you're not part of the what's popular, you are pretty much kicked out of that stage, that arena, and that's not good. We should be listening to other people and what they have to say and respect them for who they are, and not push upon them our own personal opinions.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, and actually we've gone a lot of time. Do you have time for 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up? Akllile?
Yes, okay.
It says here, these are both from Dean. What about Iran and their nuclear program? Is that a big concern? Do we need to try and put a stop to that deal Obama made with Iran?
The deal with Iran that has been reached right now is not very good. The thing is that there isn't much the world at this moment can do to prevent Iran from reaching a nuclear ability. They probably already have it. And deal or no deal, the reality is that we have a nuclear Iran. And the biggest mistake was when, instead of focusing on sanctions and preventing Iran from reaching to that point, all that the Obama administration did was postpone and try to create, try and prevent them reaching a nuclear ability, not now, but in 2 years from now. If you personally ask me, there's no different if they got it a year ago or they're going to get it a year from now, or whether they have it or not. The biggest problem is that they do have it, and they're politically very involved and encourage terrorism around the Middle East, pushing Shiite Muslim opinions and pushing them around the area. Now, we're not talking about only Iran's threat towards Israel. We're not talking about only Iran as a religious Shiite mega power. We're talking about serious problem for the whole Middle East and Asia area that we need to deal with. Our assumption from now on should be that Iran is a nuclear country, just like North Korea.
So yeah, I have a reaction to that too. And this comes from the fact that I happen to know, I know a lot of Jewish Iranians, but I know there's a lot of like Muslim Iranians too. The college I went to had a massive Muslim Iranian group, and I started to think at some point these sanctions, when they were in place, apparently weren't very strong sanctions, because there were Iranians everywhere, and they were very, very smart and intelligent people, above average compared to Americans there. All of them were masters or above. In my case, engineers. I think there were a lot that were going for medical degrees too. We have a lot to fear from Iran, and what I think happened, to answer your question, Dean, is something that we are going to all have to live with the consequences of it as humanity. The Obama administration took the same approach as President Clinton did in the 90s towards North Korea and a number of other states, Pakistan and India, that were developing nuclear weapons. They believed that if you give economic incentives for peace, these countries will abandon nuclear weapons. Well, he doesn't understand that as much as people want to believe that economics will solve all the issues and prosperity and peace, that's not the way it works. I mean, countries have certain agendas. Iran they do have an Islamic agenda. They do cooperate with secular regimes like Russia and I believe China as well, and India. But they do have an agenda where they're trying to recruit people to their religion, which is Shia Islam. They actually have a group called Hezbollah, which is most famous for being in Lebanon. But what you might not know is that they have a branch in Peru, which is all the way in South America. Why do they have it? That's anybody's guess. And I think that the answer would probably scare most of us, based on the fact that there already has been a pattern of terrorist attacks in Argentina. The last question for today, and then we'll conclude, is have they ever had to make any constitutional amendments because of the Palestinian conflict, like guns rights and freedom of speech? I think he's referring to Israel. Have you had to make any constitutional amendments regarding those two rights?
So Israel does not have a constitution just like America. We have a core law, basic law, what we call the basic laws, which are very fundamental laws, and they have not been changed due to the Palestinian conflict. They've been added more and more due to inner Israeli issues to become and to address the issues that Israel has within itself. We have to realize that when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the laws within Israel have been changed to give the Palestinians a voice within the Israeli courthouse and the Israeli laws. That was the only time that they've been changed pretty much, which is unheard of. Imagine that in Afghanistan, an Afghani person could sue American soldier or the American government within the American courthouse. And it does not happen, but in Israel it does happen, because Israel believes that if it affects you and you're a Palestinian and you want to have your voice heard lawfully, then it is you have a right to sue within the Israeli court system. And that is the way of Israel to make sure that the military system and the security system and the whole concept around that has a civilian and we have a way to regulate and see what happens there as Israelis, because we believe that we need to do our best, not only to make sure that we're safe and our rights are kept, but other people's rights are also kept. So those are the only law changes or related to that have happened, but does not change the basic laws that are pretty much our constitution.
Okay, so basically she answered the question probably better than I could, because well, I did know the question about the Constitution, but that's it for today. This is Bold Like a Leopard, and we're gonna probably explore more of these topics once in a while, even though it's not a focus of this channel. If you have any more questions or you want to raise a topic, we can speak with Akllile one day about some other issues that may have not been addressed today. Certainly, the last question in the chat will not come up because I have no idea what they're trying to say. But thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Dean. You had a lot of good questions and freedom work. And share this video and like it, subscribe to the channel, and comment also on the video. Maybe put in a few questions that you missed this time. So thanks, Akllile, and we'll speak later.